We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
People of color weren't given equal rights on small things that we take granted for today. Now, these people had a few demands. First and foremost, they wanted desegregation of lunch counters and other public facilities. Also, they wanted fair hiring for people of color in these facilities and city departments. Oftentimes, people that participated in sit-ins at these lunch counters would have charges pressed against them. They demanded that all the charges pressed against these people that participated in the sit-ins be dropped. Now, many city parks and playgrounds were shut down just because they thought it would prevent desegregation. As a result of this, Black people also demanded that these places be reopened. Lastly, they demanded that a biracial group be formed to work out a timeline for desegregating Birmingham public schools.
Police officers turned to extremely brutal acts in an effort to stop protesters.
It was April 7th and they had organized a march. We tried, we really tried to calm them down peacefully, but they started throwing rocks at us. And there were so many of them and so few of us. Do I regret that it had to come to that and that we used the methods we did? Yes, but we had to. So we unleashed the dogs on them. It was a terrible sight. A terrible sight, but we had to protect our nation and our citizens. It wasn't enough, though. We had to establish something more permanent to try and solve the problem before it happened.
Oftentimes, when sit-ins were not being performed, a lot of people would turn to other forms of resistance. The most common forms of resistance were marches, picketing, boycotting the lunch counters, singing, worship, prayer, and assemblies of support or protest. The main leaders of this entire resistance were Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Lastly, they demanded that a biracial group be formed to work out a timeline for desegregating Birmingham public schools. A temporary injunction was passed by the court. It meant that movement members were now unable to engage in any actions disrupting peace. The injunction named specific members in the ACHMR and the SCLC. ACMHR, the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, joined the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1963 after fighting hard to desegregate lunch counters and get equal employment opportunities for everyone. After the injunction was passed, ACMHR and SCLC decided to ignore it. However, news was received that people arrested could no longer be surely bailed out. Martin Luther King was detained in jail after a march towards City Hall. The group did not have a lot of participants, so they decided to go bigger. They started recruiting children. Operation D-Day was born. The children walked to the Baptist church. The police had no other option but to arrest children. The next day, more children and allies gathered up again. At this point, there was a lack of room in prisons. The police hit the children with water from fire hoses at full force. These fire hoses were intended to break windows to be able to access fires and therefore had the capacity to kill the children. The footage of this got the attention of the whole world. MLK became a public figure and was able to attract support for issues involving desegregation. In the end, a compromise was made. The white power structure was allowed 60 to 90 days to desegregate public facilities and establish equal job opportunities for African Americans.
We